morning, and you're very welcome to today's Signpost webinar. If you're new to the series, my name is Mark Gibson, and I'm the Program Manager of the Teagasc Connected Programme. As we come to the end of another week of lockdown, we hope that you are keeping safe and well. The Signpost webinar series is brought to you in association with the National Rural Network, Food Drink Ireland, and Dairy Sustainability Ireland. If you tuned into the UN Food Systems Dialogue hosted by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine this week, you would be under no illusion that we're going to see a lot of changes happening in farming over the next decade, particularly in relation to environmental sustainability. One group of farmers, along with researchers, government agencies and the industry, are leading the way in this regard. The Bride Project is an innovative agri-environment project based in the River Bride catchment of Northeast County Cork and West Waterford. And the project aims to design and implement a results-based approach to conserve, enhance and restore habitats in lowland intensive farmland. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Donal Sheehan, who is manager of the Bride Project, who's going to talk to us about how farmers can be rewarded for environmental improvement on their farms. Donal, good morning to you. Can you hear us okay?
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Pat. Thanks very much. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but anyway.
You're keeping the cardiologists in business anyway.
We'll make up for last time. We'll make up for last time. And apologies to those people who are refraining from daytime TV for a few short minutes. We'll try and make up for last time.
Well, you can't be accused of not having a dramatic entrance anyway, that's for sure. Donal, I was just giving an introduction to the Bride Project and just a very brief overview, but maybe you could just give us a little bit on your own background and you're, as I was saying earlier on, you're one of our first farmers that we've had on the series, and we hope to have many, many more. But maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your operation there and how you ended up becoming the project manager of such a successful operational group.
Yeah, well, I'm a dairy farmer with 72 cows. I'm farming here with my wife Ita, and we have two children, Olivia and Cathal. And I suppose how the Bride Project came about was I could see myself the way biodiversity was declining and disappearing before my eyes. And I knew I was part of the problem myself as well. And I suppose my father always kept bees, and when he retired some few years back, he handed over the bees to me, and I was always focused on when you're producing milk to produce as much as we could. And then when I took over the bees, it was the same kind of a mantra, just see how much honey we could produce, even though we rarely sell it. But then I could see that there was a kind of a clash where I was spraying field margins and spraying what I call now wildflowers. I was then calling them weeds. And so if you wanted a lot of honey, you needed a lot of wildflowers. And that just put me thinking, and it kind of led me down the road to why we needed some sort of a new approach to farming and to make it more sustainable, and above all, I suppose, to make it more biodiversity friendly.
Okay, good, Donal. So, Donal, you have a presentation, lots of photos and aerial imagery that I'm looking forward to. So if you could share your screen with us. Yeah. And reminder to everybody, if you have a question that you'd like us to put to Donal, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we'd be delighted to put those questions to Donal. And today's session is being recorded, and Donal's presentation will also be available on the Teagasc website afterwards. So Donal, we'll hand over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Mark. Good morning, everybody. Sorry for that glitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an idea of how the Bride Project works, and if you were a farmer, if you wanted to join the Bride Project, how it would work, and also how the payments are made, and I suppose most importantly of all, how you can make improvements on your own farm, and how we would pay for them afterwards. So it's results-based payments, and the difference between results-based payment schemes and previous schemes is that it's exactly as it says in the tin. On the tin, we pay based on the results. Farmers are told how to manage their habitats, and it's all about habitats, the number of habitats, the quality of your habitats, and you're rewarded for that. So before I start, I just want to acknowledge our Bride Project Administrator, Sinead Hickey, and Sinead compiled the slide presentation, so thanks very much, Sinead. To our working group of Dara Hulukan and John Finn from Teagasc, Paul Moore, Tony Nagel, and above all our 42 farmers who have persevered and with a lot of patience while we're kind of rolling it out and designing it and so on. So these are our project partners, and I suppose I should mention out of this slide, very sincere thank you to the Department of Agriculture and the EU for co-funding the project. It's we just got over €1 million for 5 years, and more or less told to go away and sort out biodiversity on intensive farmland. And the department have been hugely supportive of us, and that's much appreciated. So just as an opener, why farmland biodiversity is in decline, I suppose the focus for the last 50 years or so has been solely on productivity at the very lowest cost. And while quota was limiting production in milk, at least, it kind of kept a lid on it. But when quotas went in 2015, land immediately became the new quota. So for people that are not in farming, your income is based on the land you have, because that's what you're making your money from. And it's very easy to be, giving out about farmers damaging the environment, but you must remember that the way they manage their land and the production they produce, that's what they get their income from. So the more they produce, that's the signal they get, the higher their income. So inevitably there was going to be a pinch on the environment, because to get more product, you take out anything that's competing against your production. So you've more sprays, more fertilizers, more stock, more machinery, and that's just the way it is. And as I said, land is now the new quota, and it's trying to maximize this limiting asset into making income. And there's no financial value on the non-productive part of the farm, and that's to do with eligibility and policy. And we need to put a value on this, and that's what the Bride project does. It puts a value on the non-productive part of your farm, the hedgerows, the ponds, the riparian margins, the woodland, everything that didn't have a value before. We say that it does have a value now. It has a value when you go out and you look at it. It has a value for biodiversity. If it's a wetland, it has value in filtering water and flood mitigation, etc., etc. So agri-environment schemes historically, they were generally for the extensive farmer. And the intensive farmer was generally, drive on lads, and the agri-environment schemes didn't suit. And I'm not in Glas myself, because it just didn't suit. And there's a kind of a mindset that it's not for me, and that needs to change, because as intensive farmers, we need to be able to tell a green, sustainable story. And that is going to become hugely important down the road, because children are now coming out of national schools. They have 6 or 7 green flags. They know about recycling, reusing, water quality, water sustainability, biodiversity, and that's what they're going to be looking for in the years to come. And we need encouragement from the industry. The industry, I really feel, have kind of let farmers take a lot of the flack for this, but they need to share the responsibility and share the solution. So this is very much, this is the EU Green Deal in the Farm to Fork, and it's just a simplified slide there. It's 10% minimum for area for nature. This is what the Bride project does. And it's a very small slice of that pie. And the most important word there is minimum. Like, we shouldn't be talking about 3 and 4 and 5%. That's ridiculous at this day and age. You must remember that 10% is what's delivering on the ecosystem services. So that 10% is woodland that lowers your carbon footprint. It's riparian buffer strips that improve water quality, wetlands that mitigate against flooding, and it's hedgerows, field margins, and it looks paltry there to deliver all the ecosystem services that you have 90% of your area for food production and just 10% for the rest. So that's a minimum. And we try to improve the quality of that 10%. And the 90%, there's another project, a sister EIP project called the Danu project. And they focus on all the biodiversity underground, the soil quality. And in 10 years' time, I think that orange will be a lot greener. We'll have a lot, the soils will be far more healthier, and that 10% will be a very dark green. And I really do think that, because there's huge changes being made already, and farmers are to the forefront of that. So we map a farm, each farm, every time a farmer comes in, we map the farm for biodiversity. So all the shaded areas there are, the yellow is a hedgerow, and there's a green line beside it, it's a field margin. The purple is the riparian buffer strip, and even the orange there, that's the farmyard. That has a value. The several species depend on farmyards, and we put a value on that. The blue area is a wetland, And so this farmer here has what we call 8.5% BMA. And BMA is the key figure, your biodiversity managed area, combining all of the habitats here on the legend here, your hedgerows, field margins, ponds, woodland, etc., etc. And we try to get every farmer up to 10%. We give them a measure, a list of measures that they can choose, whether you're a tillage farmer or equine, dairy, beef, sheep, whatever, and you pick from those. And down at the bottom, we have a farmer suggested measure. So if the farmer feels that there's something that they'd like to do, we might add that. Some of our farmers have looked for water trucks and piping so that they can supply water to that part of the farm and take the animals out of a river, and that's been hugely successful. And it's, you know, a couple of €100 and it's sorted. So the next couple of screens now, what I want to show you is this could be intensive. It is intensive farmland, and if you look at this, and this is common all over the country because this is just where we're at, and there's no point in beating ourselves up over it. This is just where we're at. So there's virtually no biodiversity on this farm or on this field. And what I'm going to do is take you through how you could bring biodiversity back. So we'd say there's the most biodiversity there actually is along under the wires here. There's a few spear thistles, a bunches of nettles, and off here there's some spear thistles that have evaded capture as well. And they're actually very good for pollinators, and I'll show you later on, nettles are quite valuable as well. But other than that, really, there's no habitats there. So we take a Google map, and I'm just going to take this area here. It's about 25 hectares. It's 3 fields, and I'm going to show you how you might improve the biodiversity quantity and the biodiversity quality on that farm, if there was a farm. So first of all, you your hedgerows anyway. They're there, and that's nearly half a hectare, or 4,500 square meters. Then, if you're scoring for quality, we look to have your hedgerows looking like that in May, uncut, side trimmed, drawing down as much carbon as possible with all the foliage that's there, having as much blossom as possible with all the blossom that's there for pollinators, and they're going to provide a winter food source for birds in the autumn and the winter. And as well as that, then you're enhancing the environment. You can imagine if there wasn't a hedge there, or if a lot of hedgerows were taken out, it's going to change the landscape. So you're having a positive value on the landscape as well. So that's what we're looking for quality-wise. This is not what we're looking for, where the hedge has been shorn. It'll take at least, with our quality score, I'm going to talk about the results-based payment scorecards later on, but if we were scoring that, it's going to get a very poor score, and it won't get into a high score for at least 2 to 3 years until some of the blossom and the foliage start coming back. And for those who think that hedgerows should be cut every 3 years, I disagree totally with that, because you're going back down to just when a hedge is reaching its potential, you're cutting it back down to nothing again, and you're going to have nothing for 2 years, and you'll have a small bit for the third year. So then you can add a field margin. And again, this is, we just pinch a small bit off of the farmers, trying to get a bit of biodiversity managed area. So we look for 2 meters around each of the hedgerows. And it's kind of painless extraction. When you look at it first, farmers are a bit, they're not too enamored with it because there's a big gap there, but after a while, it fills up, and it's what you really want is looking like that. That's your 2 meter field margin. So that's obviously very good for pollinators. There's wildflowers there. There's rough grassland there for small mammals. There's insects. There's a nesting area for ground nesters. And that's really a perfect field margin. And this is what you don't want. We want to try and get away from using pesticides on habitats. And the reason for this is, farmers will say that they need to look after the electric fence. The problem is that the electric fence is on top of the hedge, and you need to bring out the electric fence so that you won't have to spray it and flail that field margin every year, so that you'll have a year free of green material, and you won't have to spray the electric fence. And it's all about just giving a small bit back to nature. You must remember that for years and years, we've been taking bits away from nature, and this is just giving a small bit back. So then down at the bottom of the screen here, we're going to put in, there was 50 native oak trees put in, along with alder, and that's a tree line. That's 415 square meters. And again, now you still have most of your farming area as well, your production area. And this is what that could look like in 50 or 100 years time. We'll be gone from it, but the feel-good factor when you go out looking at your spring or winter wheat or whatever it is there on a sunny spring morning or summer morning, you have to put a value on that. And they're mature oak trees that were left in the middle of a field, and it's just fantastic. Next thing over here on the left-hand side of the screen, we can put in wild bird cover. Now, this is not for the faint-hearted. This is the honours class because you're actually taking out about an acre. There's about an acre and a half gone here. So if you have 300 cows and you're stocked at a cow to the acre, you're down to 299, and you're giving an acre back to biodiversity. So that's one way to look at it, I suppose. There's nearly a half a hectare. And this is what it looks like in the summertime, which is fantastic for pollinators and small mammals again. And in the wintertime, that becomes dead, as it were, but all the seeds are available right up until Christmas and afterwards for small birds and everything that depends on them. So that's a fantastic measure. And it doesn't need to be huge. You know, this is... it'll also save you the bother of putting out peanuts, because you should be providing a food source for the small birds on your farm, so that there will be a small saving that way. Okay, if the last thing was for the honours class, this is for the applied class. So this is a Skylark plot, and you're not taking it out of production completely, but this is where most of our problem is the species, the bird species that nest in the ground. And for a skylark especially, they need a special structure. So you can't just leave your animals in willy-nilly. If you're going to have 100 or 200 hoofs inside there, you're going to have no chance for any species, and that's part of the problem. We need to leave little spaces like this for the species that are in trouble. But again, you will need to graze it, and that's important to remember, that if you don't graze it, if you don't manage it, it goes into scrub, and that might not necessarily be the best for biodiversity. Scrub is good, but in this case, this kind of ecologically high quality grassland is much better. So there's a hectare gone out there, but you will be able to graze it. And this is the bird that we're trying to look after. It's one of the birds that are in trouble. Any of the ground nesters are in trouble, because they're competing with this and they're competing with this. And no matter what you do, when you've that amount of cows or that amount of machinery going in the breeding season, you're going to have huge declines. They just can't compete. And skylarks were always able to compete with low numbers. That's part of their evolution. And they need actually the dung and the soil for invertebrates and insects and so on. But it's just that for that habitat, it needs to be managed less intensively. So then there was a wet area here. There was a hollow, so the farmer dug that out, and there was a wet area down here. So there's two ponds gone in, and they're only 10 meters by 10 meters, but hugely important for biodiversity. And this is what you can get with that. Then rough grassland, there was a line of trees that was left over here. So he fenced it off, and it's 1,000 square meters, but it wasn't very productive anyway, because there was trees in and out of it. But that's hugely important for small mammals. And these are the species that are dependent on rough grassland: barn owls, kestrels, and hen harriers. Three of the most endangered raptors that we have. Hen harrier, very low numbers. Kestrel declining, and we saw that last week in the report that came out, and barn owls also having low numbers. So you're catering for those three species when you have rough grassland. Down in the left corner, there was a rough area. So there was 320 meters. It was kind of rough hollow in the field. So there was 200 oak trees gone in there. So now you have a mini wood. And at this stage now, you have, and that's what that's going to look like in years to come. And that's the whole thing with biodiversity. You just need to wait before you can really enjoy it. And down in the right-hand corner, there was a wet area. There was a pond gone in there already, but He's fenced it off and he's managing it now as a wet grassland. And that's over a hectare, but or it's a half a hectare. But the wet grassland is what curlews depend on, lapwing and snipe, and they're also in serious decline. So from a standing start, this farmer now has 2.94 hectares gone over to biodiversity, and it gets him over the 10%. And yes, some of it is not as productive as what it would be, but nevertheless, there's a lot done for biodiversity. If you want to improve the quality, you put in some bee scrapes here. You can see these little bees on the what we do is we put them in the south-facing earth banks of the hedgerow, and you add to the quality, because now you're providing a habitat for bees. And this is what they look like. It's just simple scrape on the side of a hedge, and you can see the solitary bee burrowing into the soil. You can also put in 2 nettle patches. Again, now this is really for only top class farmers would go with this measure. So you have a nettle patch about 1 meter square in the middle of a field out from the hedge, and that is the food plant for 5 different species of butterfly. And you don't have nettles, you won't have those butterflies. And these are the caterpillars of the peacock butterfly. Then you can also put in a pollinator plot into your field margin if you want to just put in wildflowers. A difficult measure, and sometimes you might be better off just bringing out the wire or bringing out the cultivator and leaving that margin and see what comes back. Because wildflowers are deceptively difficult. But all in all, there now there's a huge improvement after being made with very little effort.
Donald, based on the measures that farmer has implemented already, has he noticed any impact on his income?
The only, well, I suppose he hasn't, because we'd be compensating for where he would lose the income. You could say, I suppose, that the Skylark plot, you can't have cows going into it every 3 weeks as you would a normal rotation. So they're going to have to be, you lengthen the rotation to create the right structure for whatever birds you're trying to conserve. So they mightn't be going in only every 35 days, or even in the breeding season, it might be extended to once every 2 months, but it does need to be managed. So other than that, we pay for the, our part pay now. It should be mentioned that we part pay. The farmer goes a long ways to paying for it as well. We part pay for the wild bird cover and some of the other measures. So multi-species grassland has been spoken about in this program many times, and if you want to reduce your nitrogen usage, putting in multi-species with clover content and other legumes will improve the soil and will reduce your nitrogen use. So you're really going towards a very sustainable farming system. And this is your multi-species plot with your you've plantain and chicory and several different species of grass, red and white clover, etc. And not forgetting our tillage farmers, they can do all of the above as well. But on top of that, what's hugely important is not to spray your winter stubble. So if you look at the photograph with the sprayed stubble field, we have you have no cover whatsoever. So you've no cover for birds and small birds, finches, skylarks, yellowhammers, the species that are in trouble again, depend on this habitat and have been doing for hundreds of years for scraps during the winter, whether it's volunteer cereals, whether it's spilt grain or just weeds that are coming back. A hugely important biodiversity area. And probably something that's overlooked by a lot of people, but it's one of our measures where we ask our farmers to not to spray 4 hectares, and this is what you have it looking like in the slide and the photograph in the bottom. You have loads of green cover that's drawing down carbon for 6 months of the year when the slide on top is not. You've no green cover there to draw down carbon. You're providing wild bird cover for birds and wild bird food. And you're also draining out any leftover nutrients from the soil so it's not leached during the winter. So this habitat is hugely important for a lot of different criteria. So this is our scorecard. So if we're scoring a hedgerow, if it's topped less than a year, you get 10 marks. If it's topped 1 to 4 years, and it's very easy to look at, you know, the lads going out can see this straight away. Or if it's mature or 5 years topped or over, you get your 60% of the payment. If there's gaps, we don't kind of, when we were designing these, they were very complicated initially, and we had to simplify them because it was taking too long. So we allow for some gaps, because usually once the hedge is secure and once it's free from disturbance, you're going to get some value out of it. So once there's not too many gaps, you're okay. And free from disturbance, go down to the bottom. If there's pesticide application, it's an auto fail. If there's dumping or spoil, it's an auto fail. And if the cattle have access to it, if it's not protected, it's an auto fail. And some people might say that that's severe, but this is the way we want to go on. We want to protect our habitats, and we send the signal out to the farmer. The payment will be for better quality habitats. So if there's a riparian buffer strip, once there's 90% greater than 3 meters, you really have most of your payments. Again, free from disturbance, you get 20 marks. So you can look at all the auto fails there. And again, if people are saying, you know, that's severe, it's not really. You know, the Bride River and a lot of rivers are used for human consumption. And, you know, we need to realize that, you know, livestock access, farmyard runoff, pesticides, etc. It's just not acceptable. And we all need to make improvements that way. And it's going to take time, but this is the road that we're on. So this is we're nearly there now, Mark. So this is your scorecard and your payment sheet, actually. And if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, this is the Farmland Biodiversity Index that has been created now. So we pay on the quantity of BMA you have. So once you're over that 10%, we'll try to get everyone up to 10%. So this farmer started off at 3.82%, and he had the hedgerow and the wet grassland. Then he added what we saw, that came to 7.95%. So now he's up at 11.77%, and that's 2.94 2 hectares of his farm or her farm, and at a rate of €500 a hectare. And that figure, you could say now, is what we're paying for ecosystem services. So all of the services that those habitats are working for, as it were, that's what €500 a hectare is doing, which is, I suppose, budgetary restrictions. We had to leave it at that, but I think it's probably worth more than that. But I would say that when I'm a farmer, I suppose. So that the quantity comes to 1,471. So then we go out and we score each of those habitats, and they get a score of A, B, or C, and we add up the scores. It's very simple, and this farmer had a score of B. So his Farmland Biodiversity Index is 12B, and based on that, the quality payments comes to €2,300. So each habitat has a quality rating and has an equivalent payment, and it comes to 2,300. So also we have a top up for a target species. So we have a list of target species. These are the species that are in trouble. They could be birds mostly, but also some amphibians and butterflies. And this farmer had 2 species, skylark, and he had barn owl, so he gets €200 as a top up. And in my opinion, if you have curlew or lapwing, because they're really, really scarce, it should be more than that, but that's what our budget pays. If you have a target habitat, which is wet grassland or woodland, mature woodland, or species-rich grassland, you get another payment. So we have a list of target habitats. And if you have, once you go over 8 habitats, you get a top up of €100. So it's all incentive based. So this farmer has a Farmland Biodiversity Index of 12B, and he gets a payment, or she gets a payment of €4,171. And just finishing up, this is a biodiversity desert, and this is where we are, and this is where I am myself. This is a monoculture grassland, and really, whether we have grass fed or whatever, this is biodiversity poor. The next part of that, it's go up to the top of the picture there, and that's where the biodiversity starts in the hedgerow. So that's why there isn't a whole lot in a monocultural grass field. And this is a biodiversity oasis, and we need to go somewhere between the two. You won't get huge production from this. You get some production. You won't get very little biodiversity in the other. There needs to be a balance, and that's where we're aiming to go to. So to summarize the changes that need to happen, we need advice as farmers on ecology and sustainability as well as agronomy, because they can be they can disrupt one another. We need to make environmental discussion positive because it affects everybody. Farmers are at the heart of it because they're managing the land, but it affects the wider community. And I view it as an opportunity. It's definitely not an obstacle. We need to see it as an opportunity. There is money to be made from it, and I don't want to kind of be seen to be equating nature with a financial payment, but that is where we're at, unfortunately. There needs to be a focus on delivering a higher environmental standard of food production with a view to getting a premium. And that doesn't mean the same old, you know. It needs to be channeled back to the farmer from the consumer. That isn't there at the moment. We are paid as farmers to produce as much as we can. There is no signal coming from the consumer to say, yes, Donald, thank you very much. We like the way you're farming. That premium needs to come back, and that will change radically if we got that premium. And I'm not going out to cap my hand now, but it sends a signal to the farmer that it's important to look after the environment. And as I said, they should be paid for delivering the environmental benefits, which the bride are, I suppose that's what you could say. So we need the specialist advisors leading the way and making the changes. When you can talk about, you know, Hagberg falling number and EBI and growth per hectare or whatever, we need to be talking about butterflies and birds in the same sentence. That's where we need to get to. It's not there at the moment. We shouldn't forget that the consumer is king. It doesn't matter what policy dictates. A market demands ecosystem services, but as a lot of farmers would say, you have to be black to go green as well. And I do feel that going back to advising one-on-one as well as the discussion group model would be beneficial, because when an advisor goes out one-on-one on a farm, there's a lot of things talked about that aren't talked about at discussion group level, and I think that would be beneficial. And the processes out there, you know, we need to finish on the greenwashing, because it does damage farmers' reputation. You know, we need to acknowledge that there are problems out there, but when we'll reach where we have biodiversity back in our soils and back on our land, then we'll be able to show that yes, it has come back. So thanks very much, Mark, and sorry again for the glitch.
No, you're fine, Donald. Thank you for that. Really enjoy that presentation, and you gave a very good, you know, pictorial view of how it should be done. I'm interested in the non-financial support that the project provided to those farmers, because we know that, you know, there's a learning process here, and around, you know, growing biodiversity. I often remember a farmer we had presenting at the Agri-Environment Conference a number of years ago, and he showed a slide of a very intensively managed crop of barley on one side of the fence, and then a field of heather on the other side of the fence. And he said, if you pay me to grow barley, I'll grow barley, and if you pay me to grow heather, I'll grow heather. And it was, I think it just boiled it down to a very simple case that we have to put a value on the nature, and it has to be a financial value as well as a societal value. But just going back to that point around the non-financial support that you provided to those farmers, and maybe you could talk just about the process there of how you brought that farmer, the journey that farmer went on.
So we went out and surveyed every farm, and there's no point in telling a tillage farmer that, you know, you need to put in a tree line and a hedgerow right down the middle of a grain field, because it doesn't suit them. They have big machinery. So it's all about tailoring the plan to suit the farmer and to suit the enterprise. And also we're looking at what's on the farm. You can't put in a pond if there isn't a wet area there. You know, you need water, and some farms just don't suit having a pond in them. So we bring in the farmer and we go over the plan, and the farmer you know, is fully aware of what they're doing, and they go with it or they don't, and generally they all did go with it. And the most interesting thing was, we had entry criteria for farmers to get in, and one of the criteria was you pick out 0 to 4 habitats, you get 10 points, 4 to 8 habitats, you get 20 points, and it was a scoring system of getting 100 points, and the highest number of points got in. And 8+ habitats got you 30 points and over. Every single one of them took creating 9 habitats. And even when we had a budget for 30 farmers and we had 42 in, and we said it to them at the meeting, we said it to the 42 farmers that we're not going to be able to pay as much as what we thought we had. If we have the 42 in, we're going to have to whittle it down to 30. And there was a unanimous decision taken that no one should be asked to leave if they didn't want to leave. So these farmers were really keen on making the improvements. And I wouldn't like it to be said either now that, money wasn't, they didn't say money wasn't an issue, because that would be taken for granted. But first and foremost, they wanted to make the improvements. They were keen to make the improvements, and they were keen to learn.
Well, I suppose it does look, money has to come into it, doesn't it? I mean, where you see the top performing dairy herds are making €1,000 per hectare, that has to be brought into the equation. It's a very difficult choice.
And if you're on €1,000 per hectare and you're asking a farmer to take out a hectare for woodland or for field margins or whatever, that farmer is going to say, well, I'm making €1,000 per hectare already, and you have to equate the payment. It's as simple as that. That's the way it is.
We have a lot of questions coming through. So before we just go to the questions, I'm just going to ask our audience permission, because just of the time delay at the start. I think we will keep the session going for a little bit longer this morning, just because of the sheer volume of questions. If you're happy enough with that, Donal. So Pat, I'm going to hand over to you, and you could kick off some of the questions for us.
Yeah, there's some quick ones and some that might take a little bit longer. Just in relation to field margins, do they remain eligible for BPS as it stands at the moment?
You'll have to talk to the department about that, Pat. Our cows in the Bride area, they have long necks and they're able to graze it. So you can leave them in. We have a handle at the end of each field margin. We leave the cows in there so they can graze it.
Okay.
That just needs to be, that is a huge problem. I'll put it to you that way. Every farmer asks, and it's a problem. And I think, to be fair, the department are aware of it, because it's there's a lot of media talk about it, and I'm sure it'll be sorted. But our payment system pays for everything, including scrub, because scrub has a value as well. So yeah.
A question there in relation to the field margins: are they just left to regenerate, or is there any seed added to?
Yeah. So in one of the slides we showed putting in a pollinator plot where you can improve the quality of the field margin. But to be honest about it, some of them have taken off, but they're difficult. Wildflowers are difficult to manage, and especially inside the field margin, they're competing against the hedge coming out on top of them. They're competing against brambles, and very often you might be better off to just bring out the wire and see what comes back if you turn over the sod. And even if you don't turn over the sod, once you stop the disturbance, you're going to get rough grassland, and after that you'll get field voles or bank voles and shrews and field mice, etc. So once there's no disturbance, you're improving biodiversity straight away. You get insects, etc. But I suppose to improve the quality of it, putting in wildflowers would improve, I suppose, the pollinator quality of it at least.
There's a number of questions about the management then of the margins, the best width to leave to be allowed or to be able to flail it with the most ease. What's your formula for that? So
I suppose really the field margin, really what we are doing with the field margin is just trying to replicate what was out in the field 50 years ago, and it's a kind of a suboptimal habitat. It's not the most suitable habitat for wildflowers to compete, because the hedge is coming out on top of them, as I said, brambles are coming out. So you need to flail it every year, really, because you're also trying to prevent pesticide the following year on top of your wire. So flailing it every year will keep it free, and it'll give wildflowers a chance to come back. So that's probably the best management. If you don't, you lose the field margin, and our field margin score, if there's encroachment by the hedge, you're losing the habitat, and then you've only one habitat. So you need to keep it flailed. That's the way our scorecard works.
Okay, a couple of questions in relation to ponds and wetlands. Are the ponds lined, or are they just naturally?
No, we don't actually look for them to be lined, because they're expensive, I suppose. And generally speaking, when you dig out a pond, just track it in and leave it, because you have an extra dimension when you have once you have soil in the bottom of the pond, you'll have plants growing in it, you'll have you'll have various invertebrates, and you'll have pond creatures, etc. And it's I mean, a pond with a liner isn't bad, but it's a lot better if you can do without it. But in some instances, if you've only water off the shade or whatever, a pond is very nice, even aesthetically on any farmyard.
Now, a tougher question. There was just a question there in relation to achieving the say the 10%. How much does that reduce I mean, some of it stays as productive area or semi-productive area. So if you're to get that 10%, how much do you think that generally leads to a potential loss of production?
Well, I suppose, Pat, if you take any intensive farmland, whether it's cereals or whether it is dairying or beef or whatever, if you take dairying, for instance, and you're stocked at a cow to the acre, and some farms are really intensively stocked, that's an acre gone, and that's the way I look at it. If you have wet grassland, or if you have, we said a skylark plot that we were talking about, you get some of it back that way. But we just have to appreciate that if you don't have the habitats, you won't have the species. And we do need to appreciate as well that we do need to, in my opinion, there's too much land has gone for food production. We're gone too far, and we can't deliver on the ecosystem services that the public and that the world are looking for us to deliver on. And there just has to be a bit of rebalancing. And I know people will say that there's people starving and we have to make an income, but that aside, that is, we're cutting off our nose to spite our face, I suppose.
There's questions in there about the recruitment of farmers and the proportion of farmers who are willing to go this route. From your experience, was it difficult to persuade farmers to make the move, and what proportion of the farmers, say in your area, I suppose at an initial stage, were willing to go along? And do you get a sense that, having seen what you have done, that there are now more who might be willing to go that path?
Or there's definitely more. We get so many phone calls now about not people necessarily wanting to join, but just what they can do themselves. And when we started out in 2018, I'd say some farmers saw it as I remember one day I was going to the local creamery, and someone started kind of smirking and asking me how are the birds and the bees. But I think that has changed now. They see it now as being more important than what it was. And our launch night, we had 40 seats at the Corn Event Centre from Wymart, and there was 120 turned up. A lot of them were community, but most of them were farmers. And when we opened the process of recruiting farmers, we had 65 in 2 weeks, and we had to close it down because we were only looking for 30. So, and since, I mean, the bar has got a lot higher. I mean, we would have, I'd say we would have increased the challenge for our farmers, I'd say, from initially in 2018, by the time we had scorecards and things done only in the last 12 months, I'd say the bar has got a bit higher, all right, yeah.
I think, Donald, there's no doubt about it. There's a huge appetite there amongst farmers to do this. It's the support and the enabling environment, I think, that's needed. Just a question around farmers who rent land, and can they create BMA that might be then wiped out if someone else takes on the land? And I suppose that for me raises the bigger question about the length of these schemes, because we know that I know from my former days as a reps planner, you do a 5-year plan, but there's no guarantee that that land or that the following scheme might be attractive enough for the farmer to remain in it. What's your view on that? It's
a huge problem. We allow rented land, providing that they're in for the duration of the project, which is until 2023. But inevitably, there's milk price and grain price, they're static. So when this is finished, and if there's no bride two, or if there isn't another glass, farmers can plow up these and put them back into farm production, and that's a huge problem. I think where that problem would be solved is if there was, as I said, if there's an increment coming back from the consumer continuously, even though it might be small, it sends out a signal that you need to hold on to this. We can't really, we can't take out any more habitats because we're going to have to put them back after. And we do need to start putting back some of the habitats and having some sort of consistency where farmers can be guaranteed that the value will remain on those habitats, that it's not just here today and gone tomorrow. Because a lot of our farmers have put in woodlands consisting of 150 native trees, and that land is gone. Then that's gone out of farm production. That's a quarter of an acre or half an acre gone from spring barley or winter wheat, and it's 3 or 4 cows gone or whatever. So and all our farmers are doing it. And with a view that it won't be coming back. So there does need to be some kind of consistency with the environment.
And one of the points, Donald, that was made during this national dialogue the other day was that farmers can't be expected to make this change on their own. And as I was mentioning earlier on, it's more than just financial support that's needed.
Yeah.
What's your view in terms of the support or the enablers that could be put in place by government or indeed industry as well?
Well, I think awareness. It's the biggest problem. When farmers are aware that this is right and this is wrong, they'll automatically change over. And there's a great saying from the Base Ireland group, farmers educating farmers. We put an awful lot of value on getting farmers out on farm walks and seeing what can be done and saying, look, lads, the wheels haven't fallen off. But there does need to be huge support from the industry. The industry, I think it's just a lack of knowledge on their part as well. It came so fast, all of this environment and biodiversity. It caught a lot of people unawares, and they're finding it hard to deal with. But the greenwashing doesn't help. It annoys me when we say that, we're this and we're that, because when it's proven after that, no, we're not. It just, the slogans that our food products have, it makes it harder then for the consumer to trust us. And that's a huge problem. And farmers and processors and retailers, all the ways back to the consumer, there needs to be collaboration there, where the consumer needs to know what they're getting, and it needs to be exactly what it says on the tin.
Huge amount of positive comments coming through here, Donald, about the project and the work you're doing. Inspirational is a word that seems to be popping up here quite often.
Donald for president has cropped up as well.
I'm sorry?
Definitely don't want that.
So, and Donald, do you do open days, or how can people get some access to kind of see what's happening within the project?
Yeah, we have open days. We have demonstration farms, and that's thanks to our farmers. But I suppose COVID put paid to it. We got in 2 last year. We split the group into 25 and 25, or 20 and 20. But we would have liked to have it open to the public, but because of numbers, we just couldn't. But we do always, we were hoping to have open days. But I suppose the best thing I could say is that we have a habitat management guidelines book available from our website. Tis free to download for anyone, or we have hard copies here in the office if anyone wants it. And it'll just give them an idea of how best to manage their habitats for biodiversity.
Donald, there's I suppose a couple of questions relating to how this feeds into policy, and I suppose we may have some policymakers on the line who particularly are looking at CAP infrastructure and needing to go to Europe with a design for the future of our CAP environmental initiatives. What from your project would you see as being appropriate to mainstream, or is it just the entire government?
I think that the CAP should be paying for the BMA. I think part of a lot of the CAP is an income supplement, and make no mistake about that. Farmers cannot make ends meet in some enterprises, and that payment, I don't want to see any farmers' payment reduced, but there should be some of it go towards looking after the environment, retaining the BMA, paying for the BMA with a results-based scheme, paying for the quality, similar to what we are doing. I think that should be included in any cap. And I think, you know, Ireland are in a hugely positive position, because despite a lot of habitats being taken out, there's still a lot of it left. And nature will restore habitats very quickly, but you just need it to give it a chance to breed. And from my experience, since we started on the Bride project, farmers are hugely positive and they're very engaging. There were several people rang me with the recent EIP funding project application that came out. There was a lot of farmers interested in setting up a kind of a mini Bride project in their own area. So this is waiting to happen. The funding is all that's needed in whatever shape or form it will take. But I think farmers are willing to do it. There's no doubt about that.
There's a good few questions in relation to co-benefits for water and whether you're taking on board some measures that would be fairly specifically focused on water, particularly given that you're based around the Bride catchment.
Yeah. Well, some of our measures will improve, you know, water quality in the Bride River, but you know, we have 3 meter buffer strips, but you need to realize that the buffer strip really is only, it's a kind of it's a buffer to stop, you know, fertilizers and runoff going into the river, but you have to go further back than that. You have to, it's prevention is the issue. The buffer is more a biodiversity measure than a nutrient management issue. We all need to look at what fertilizers we're putting out, and you shouldn't need any buffer if we had the right amount of fertilizers. You know, if the fertilizer was put out to suit the growth and the plant that was there and the take up, you shouldn't need a buffer strip. So we autofill for you know, fertilizers and buffer strips, or slurry and buffer strips, but we can't, and we don't want to go down the road of inspecting farmers for what nitrogen they're using. You know, that's not where we're at. But as I said, the Danu project are dealing with lowering the nutrients that farmers are using and getting away from chemicals and trying to improve the soil so that plants, crops and grass are stronger and more resilient. So side by side with the Bride project, you know, hopefully in years to come, we'll have a much better farming system.
There's an interesting social question here. Does the scheme help bring farming and non-farming rural dwellers closer together?
I think it does. I mean, there was about 50 people from outside the farming area at our launch night. But I think the local community, that's why the Bride was, why so many farmers got involved in it, because it's biodiversity regeneration in a dairying environment, but the Bride is the Bride River, and it connects all the communities from Glenville down to Racormac, down to Castlines, Connacht, Tallow. You know, that's the common denominator between all those communities. And we all have we share it as a common resource because we're using it for drinking water. And the way farmers manage their land has a huge impact on that drinking water quality, as well as, you know, householders and non-farmers because of, you know, septic tank issues and local authorities. It's important to say that, but it's a common thread that we all share. And I think there is great support from the community because they see it as enhancing their areas as well when you're planting trees and planting hedgerows, etc.
Pat, just while we're talking about checklists and so on, and I know you haven't prepared you for this question, but I know that you are working on a checklist approach or a scoring system related to the Signpost Farm program. Would you care to just share some what thinking is going on there in that?
I suppose there's been a good bit of talk over the last while about developing a broad sustainability plan across farms, where they look at, I suppose, the entirety of the objectives that we're trying to work towards, be it greenhouse gas mitigation, identifying risks that are there to water quality and trying to reduce them, and enhancing biodiversity and bringing it all into, I suppose, a single planning process where you're engaging with the farmer to improve the outcomes across all of those. And with the biodiversity, as Donald points out, it's very much about creating space and reducing impact. I think in the water quality aspect, it's more about looking at the risks associated with a particular farm to the water quality in its environment, and it can vary greatly depending on the type of landscape and particularly the type of soil that you have. So taking that on board and trying to target issues that are very specific to the area. And I suppose in relation to greenhouse gases, it's a very general practice thing and common practice across all farms to look at the implementation of technologies that can reduce our impact. And I suppose what we're trying to do is, rather than have a whole pile of individual messages coming at farms from a whole load of different sources, to give the farmer an opportunity to have one single plan in place to address all of those issues in a coherent way, and in a way that meets his or her capacity to implement things on an ongoing basis. So I think one of the parts that we're trying to build into it is I suppose a continuation process, that you put in place a number of things this year, you follow it on with a number of things next year, that you're in a mode of continual improvement, and then trying to align that with schemes. So I think that's the type of approach that we're trying to bring. It's an approach of broad environmental improvement on a continual basis.
Mm-hmm. So it's good to see that some of the messages from the Bride project are being broadened out there. I suppose, Donald, from I asked you earlier on about the non-financial supports that are given to the farmers who are participants of this program. How often would they receive a visit or some guidance, or is there a telephone line that they can call for support? Because I'm conscious that previous schemes, farmers would maybe receive a plan, they'd receive some training perhaps, but in terms of FaceTime with an expert or even other farmers has been limited in the past.
Yeah, well, the way the model is rolled out, we assess the habitats yearly. Now, we're trying to get that down to the farmers themselves, scoring the habitats, and us spot checking them and making sure that they're right. So we score the habitats every year. So anytime that they put in a new habitat, if they're creating a woodland or a hedgerow, because of departmental regulations and accountability, we have to go out and make sure that it's in and make sure that it's been done right. So it's usually probably at least twice a year that we go to every farm, and then we meet them all. We try to meet them twice a year on a farm walk, but that hasn't been possible. But we would meet most of them twice a year. But my own phone, unfortunately, is available all the time, anytime they want to ring, and they do ring constantly. And that's fine with where to put up bird boxes, or how to get pollinator plots, or how to get wildflowers, or whether it's time to put in their wild bird cover or whatever. So yeah, we're available all the time, and Sinead is available all the time also.
I suspect your phone is going to be ringing a little bit more often after today, Donald. We have a lot of questions around people who wanted to join the project, but that's not really going to be possible. But maybe, is there any advice you could offer people who wanted to maybe look at establishing a group, be it under the EIPs, and maybe just what are the kind of the learnings that you've found over that experience?
Yeah, well, I think an awful lot of it really is just managing what you have and retaining what you have. Cut out the pesticides. We don't say anything about pesticides on the crop, but pesticides on habitats is just a no-no. And it's a kind of a mindset that we have to, you see thistles or nettles or any kind of weeds coming up, and you get the budget or you get the sprayer and you're out. I always say that farmers don't need ecologists; they need psychologists. Just to change their mindset. And I often joke with them that we provide counselling below in the office to try and get them to change their ways. But very often, just leaving your hedgerows go, extending the width of the field margin, putting in a pond if you have a wet area, planting a line of trees along a passageway, keeping it out from the passageway that it doesn't get caught in machinery, etc. you can put in 100 trees in a passageway that way, and it's not a natural habitat, but any tree is better than no tree. So there's an awful lot of small things they can do, and they'll get a lot of that information on the website.
Brilliant.
There's one other question. I'm not sure you want to give up to tell me if you want to go ahead, but there's a question around the idea of landscape and I suppose landscape scale impact, and trying to design landscape or to have corridors, etc., at landscape level rather than just in. Is there anything you can do, or is there anything you're considering in that space?
Yeah, well, again, I didn't mention it, but the entry criteria for to get into the Bride project, there was higher points got if there was 2 or more farmers coming together as opposed to an individual. And the whole concept of the Bride project is the landscape scale. I mean, Pat, you'd know previously, all the agri-environment schemes, I could have been in an agri-environment scheme, but the next farmer could be 4 or 5 miles away. So the 2 of us could be doing everything right, and everyone in between is doing everything wrong. So the whole concept of any environmental scheme should be that everyone is doing the basics right. Every single farmer is doing the basics right. Yeah, if you're a tillage farmer, you'll be doing things slightly different to a dairy farmer or a beef farmer or a grassland farmer. But in general, everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet, and groups of farmers getting together is the way to go rather than individuals. An individual will never make any impact on the environment.
Okay, Donal, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your presentation. Really enjoyed it, and the conversation afterwards as well. If people want to find out more about the project, I presume just Google Bride Project, they'll find us.
Bride Project and social media, yeah.
Very good. Thanks for helping with the questions. And I just want to thank our production team, Yvonne Maher and Andy Boland. And hope you enjoyed the weekend. Enjoy the good weather while we have it. And hopefully we'll be able to get out and stretch the legs a little bit more over the next few months. And I think, Donal, you mentioned psychologists. I think we're all going to need psychologists, I think, after all of these various lockdowns. But look, just say thank you again. And next week we'll be joined by Jenny Deacon from the EPA, who's going to be giving us an update on the catchment approach to water quality management there. So with that,
and Mark, just a final point, Donal's kind of modest in relation to the some of the outputs they have, but the guidebook that they produced is an absolutely superb piece of work. And if anybody is looking for a real detailed guide as to how to work with farmers, I think they would do well to download it.
I agree.
Thanks very much, Pat.
Okay, great stuff. Thanks again. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks very much. Bye.